Welcome to Quarantine. Today we are going to be learning all about snails and slugs. The gastropods are a fascinating type of animal, and I'm excited to get into that. And our math lesson is going to be about dimensions, and if we have time, the Fibonacci sequence.
Should be fun. And I honestly don't know much about snails, so I'm curious what there is to learn.
Yep, a big thank you to Jamie and her kids who submitted the lesson plan for this one because it's a fun one. I want to give a quick welcome to those who are watching live, and welcome to you if you're watching the replay. So shout out to Marine Man from Texas, Lindsay from Kansas, Princess Perfect from New Hampshire, Crystal from Florida, Hey It's Corgi and Toby from Minnesota, Haley from Maryland, Natalie, Paul Jen from Ottawa, Pegboard from California, Miner Master from Delaware, Queen Donut, King Husky, Harper from Texas. It is good to see you guys here this morning. Thank you for joining us for another science and math episode. We are nearing the end of quarantine, but that does not mean the end of videos from Science Mom and Math Dad. We are going to take a bit of a vacation and get some things ready for our summer content, and we'll be back on June 17th with videos every Wednesday, a live stream with science and math content for you. So mark your calendars for June 17th, same time, same place on both Facebook and YouTube, and we will look forward to seeing you then after we finish up this week.
All right.
Anything else you want to say about finishing up?
No. Teach me about these gastropods.
Can you believe that this is episode 51?
Impressive.
51. Tomorrow is going to be episode 52, and then on Thursday we have a fun game show style review. And if you would like to submit questions for that, I will be posting the link once again on social media and on Patreon. But now let's dive into gastropods. So if I asked you to describe what a slug is, what would you say?
Ooh, it's a slimy little crawly thing that just, it's like the tortoise of the, I want to say insect world, but the little tiny world of, yeah, I don't know. They crawl around and leave a lot of slime.
Okay, so slime is a good adjective, and I'm going to ask you guys in the chat now, write down something that you know about slugs, because this is the first type of gastropod we're going to talk about, and these are fascinating creatures.
So that they want to be snails, but they don't have the shells.
That is a big distinguishing factor. So they're a lot like snails, but they don't have shells. I see Pamela asks, is there painting with the scientist today? There is painting with the scientist today at 9:15. And I should give a quick shout out to our moderators, our wonderful moderators on YouTube, Blanca Morales, Science Mom Jamie, Science Mom Jody, and the Science Mom Liza. Science Mom Krista is on Facebook. So I'm seeing, oh, can you plug us into the Ethernet?
They're slow.
I'm seeing, yeah, Deepa says they're gross. Saganya says they are slow. Queen Donut says they are slow. Aya says they're not very cute. Kate says they're slimy. And slugs are slimy and very slow. I'm seeing that is definitely the most common thing that people know about slugs. Kate says if you put salt on them, they will die, and they don't like salt. And this is true. And the reason why salt will kill slugs, I hope nobody ever tries this, because this is a really mean way to end a slug's life. If you put salt on a slug, it will die because slugs are made mostly of water, just like we are. You can kind of think of human beings as being big bags of water. We are mostly water, and so are slugs, but we have skin that protects us from drying out. You're not going to be losing a lot of water through your skin because your skin is it's not a very porous layer, or it's going to keep everything in. A slug,
thankfully,
a slug is a very wet animal, and if it dries out, it will die. And if salt is put on a slug, that causes the water to leave the body, and the slug will die. Don't ever do that to a slug.
So that you made me think of that Star Trek episode where these aliens contact them. They're like, ugly bags of mostly water. And they're talking about the humans. That's how they refer to them. Just ugly bags of mostly water.
And the bags of mostly water is quite accurate, really. Hopefully, I don't think we're too ugly as far as organisms go, but all right, back to slugs though. So slugs are mostly water, and this is why they are slimy. The slime actually helps to keep the slug from drying out. Pretty cool, right?
Well,
now I'm going to, and Suzanne says they are invertebrates. That's another important thing to know about slugs. They do not have a skeleton. They don't have bones inside them to give them structure. So like insects, they are in the family of invertebrates, but they don't have an exoskeleton. Most insects have an exoskeleton on the outside that gives them support, and slugs don't. Slugs are basically a big muscle with a mouth. That's essentially what they are. I'm going to share my screen with you and pull up a slideshow I made that will show you a little bit more about these fascinating animals.
Yeah. Whoa.
So the first one here that we have is a banana slug. And I have to say, of all the slugs, the banana slug is my favorite because they are yellow, they are big, and they are just so cool.
Enormous.
They are enormous. They can get up to, 6 inches long, and they live on the west coast of the United States and Canada. So they live in the temperate rainforest all along the west coast. Most slugs really need a moist environment, and there are 2 reasons for this. One, they need a moist environment so that they don't dry out because they don't have a hard covering that will keep the water in, and they can dry out. And then 2, they need a moist environment to be able to move. Remember how I said that slugs are sort of like a muscle with a mouth? Well, the way that they move is really cool. They contract their foot. That's the main part of the body that has contact with the ground. And they contract, release, and they slide forward that way. But it only works if they have something to slide on. And this is where the slime comes in. Slugs make 2 types of mucus. One is kind of watery and thin, and the other one is super thick and strong. And banana slugs, you can see how big they are.
Huge.
They can change the type of mucus they make, and they can make a slime that acts like a big rope. And so if they're up on a leaf of a tree and they decide, I want to get down to the ground, but it's, about a good meter drop, they can just start that sticky slime, and they can actually hang on a rope of slime and slowly go all the way down to the ground.
That's crazy. But just go back a minute. Are you telling me that entire underbelly is their foot?
Yes, the entire underbelly part is called the foot. And then this hole that you can see on the side, that is actually how they breathe. So these animals have a little lung, and they breathe through this blowhole, which is sort of like how a whale breathes, right?
Wait, is that at the back end or the front end? Where is
the front end. So this first picture, you can see the slug is all the way extended with the 2 tentacles that you can see out at the top. And the second picture shows you what happens if the slug gets a little frightened and is like, ooh, I better take my tentacles and put them inside my head. And you can see that it pulls them back in. Now, the part that it looks, is on top, kind of like a little, I don't know how to describe it, like a little layer that has the hole, that's called the mantle. And that's actually the leftover part of what would have been a shell if this had been a snail. And some slugs still have a shell. It's just underneath that mantle, that harder part, and it protects them. They can draw their eyes back inside of it. Now, when I say eyes, what I really should say is tentacles, because slugs have 4 tentacles. 2 of them on top are for seeing and smelling.
Those antennae-like things?
Mm-hmm. Yep. And they have little eyes at the tips that help to detect light and dark. And then the 2 at the bottom they're like chemical laboratories on hooks, and they can touch and they can get a lot of information about where they are and what types of food are nearby with those little chemical tentacles. So the sensory ones, the ones on bottom, those always come out first. If a slug is frightened, or a snail, because they both have these features, if they're frightened and they pull in, well, the first thing they do when they reach their head out is they put out their sensory tentacles. And then if things, chemically, they can tell like, okay, this smells safe, then they'll put out their top tentacles that they can see with. Isn't that cool?
That is. Okay, but so just so we're clear, on the right half of the screen, that's not an eye we're looking at. That's where they breathe.
That's where they breathe. And it is called the pneumostome or pneumostome. It's the breathing pore. It's kind of like the blowhole of a whale or a dolphin, where they can breathe in and out, and it attaches to their lung. Now, here's kind of a cool thing about slugs. If you see a slug and you see that there's a trail of slime behind it, you might think like, oh, it poops out its back end. It does not. The poop actually comes out close to where that breathing hole is, underneath the mantle.
What?
Yes.
Ew.
Now, slugs eat plants, but not all slugs eat plants. Some slugs eat other slugs. Some slugs eat worms. Some slugs eat insects. Some slugs will eat just dead animals. Like there's a whole variety, but for in the most part, Slugs are not picky eaters. They'll eat just about anything as long as it is wet and they can get their mouth on it. And they have thousands of teeth. Their tiny little mouth is made of what's called a radula. There are all these little teeth where they can scrape off. And the reason why most slugs are viewed as pests is because if they get into your garden, guess what they will eat?
All your plants?
All your garden. Yes, they can eat a lot. This is from the note page that we have today. Just a quick little overview of, you've got the mouth that has those thousands of teeth, the radula. You've got the 2 types of tentacles, the breathing pore, the foot, and the skirt, that little edge. But now let's talk about what happens if we go into the ocean.
Just a sec. Maybe I misunderstood what the foot was. Just a sec.
The foot is the main part of the body. Like, it's the whole
the whole thing is the foot.
Pretty much. The whole big part of the body is called the foot.
Okay.
Because that's really, the slug is just, it's moving along and the most of the body is like a big muscle. Most of it's the foot, which is how it moves. Now, so that's slugs on land, which is one type of slug. But
you said they had teeth. Just like, can they hurt you? Could they like bite?
Their teeth are so tiny. No, if you put a slug on your hand and you tried to entice it to eat you, I don't think it would like the way you tasted. But if you left it on your hand for a very long time and maybe you put some special sugars or something that you knew the slug would like, it could start to eat at your skin. But it would be kind of like an exfoliating sponge bath. It would just be scraping off like the dead layer of your skin. I don't think that their teeth are strong enough to break through unless you really encouraged them and gave them a lot of time, but nobody's going to do that.
Okay.
So no, a slug is not going to bite you. But slugs can, bit by bit, they can eat strawberries and lettuce and other fruit that you have in your garden. So most people view them as pests. But if we go underwater, now most people view them as wonderful creatures because look how beautiful they are.
That is pretty.
So this is a nudibranch, which has a very strange pronunciation. Most people who see this want to say nudibranch, but it's actually nudibranch. Nudibranchs are sea slugs. They are underwater slugs. And these feathery things that you see coming out of their backs, that is actually how they breathe. So nudibranch comes from nuda, which means naked, and bronch, which means branched or lungs. And so naked lung is where you get the name of this sea slug, because the way that they breathe is with these little branches that they have on their backs, and having lots of little branches makes it easier for the gases to be exchanged, easier for them to get oxygen out of the water. Now, these sea slugs have the most amazing colors, and part of the reason they're so colorful is because they want to send a loud and clear signal to all the fish and other things that might be tempted to eat them, saying, I am poisonous, don't eat me, I will make you sick.
Are they really poisonous?
Most of them are, because a lot of nudibranchs, they eat things like poisonous sea sponges or stinging jellyfish or sea anemones. They eat things that other animals would normally not be able to eat. They eat things that are poisonous or things that have pneumatocysts, these stinging cells, and then they take that poison and they put it in their own body to say, haha, now you can't eat me either, fish.
It's like Kirby on Smash Brothers. My daughter always chooses Kirby, and then she always eats me and absorbs my powers. Yeah.
That's right. So that's a good analogy for nudibranchs. They're like Kirby, powerful. Then they do have incredible colorful colors, but most of them are very small. So when you see this picture, this looks like an enormous animal, but most of them are, about the size of your little finger or maybe even smaller. Some of them are only a couple, centimeter long. So most of them are quite small, but some of them are larger. This is one of my favorites. This nudibranch here, and I just forgot the name. If someone knows the name, throw it in the chat. But I think it's a blue something. This nudibranch is very small, and it actually eats Portuguese man-of-war jellyfish. Now, the Portuguese man-of-war is poisonous. You've probably heard on the news of people getting stung by Portuguese man-of-wars. They have a really painful sting. They're really small, but they're a dangerous jellyfish because their sting is so powerful. But this tiny little sea slug, because of the way that it's nudibranchs, because of the way that those go out, those branches of lungs, it's actually able to swim. And it swims around in the ocean. It eats these poisonous Portuguese man-of-war jellyfish. And then if it washes up on a beach and you pick it up, you might get stung too, because it takes those same stinging cells in the jellyfish and it puts it into its own body. So this picture here of someone holding it, it allows you to see how small it is. But in real life, if you found one on a beach, you would not want to pick it up because chances are that it could sting you.
Oh my goodness. Looks like some fancy Pokemon. I think it's,
Doesn't it?
that is pretty crazy.
But yeah, this is a legitimate nudibranch. This is a sea slug.
Looks like it'd actually be really fast too.
Most of the sea slugs that can swim, they're not very fast. They sort of undulate through the water. They're not super speedy or super fast swimmers, but they can swim. And this is one of the biggest nudibranchs. This is the Spanish dancer, and this one is actually like about this big. I mean, it's a good like 1.5 feet across, and it does swim through the waters pretty well by, you know, kind of moving its flaps.
I never would have guessed that was a slug.
Yeah, it is. And the thing that makes this a slug is it shares a lot of qualities with slugs that we have on land. It produces a type of slime in self-defense, and then it has a really cool way of organizing its body. It does have a small little brain where, well, it has like a nervous system that sort of functions like a brain. It has a little digestive system. And then here's the cool thing about slugs. If you only need 2 slugs to start a colony of slugs, and it can be any 2 slugs. So let me back up a little bit. When I was a kid, we got hamsters. We had 2 hamsters, and they were supposed to be sisters. They were supposed to be 2 girl hamsters. But pretty soon, one of them built a nest, and then we had about 12 baby hamsters. So what happened?
One of them was male, and one of them was female.
Yes, one of them was male, and one of them was female. Well, with slugs, they're hermaphrodites. That means that each slug is both a boy and a girl at the same time. And any 2 slugs, if they're the same species, they can mate, and you can get a colony of lots more slugs.
That's crazy.
Kind of crazy, huh? So that's one of the things that sort of distinguishes slugs, these type of gastropods, is this really cool way where they're like, you know, I'm not going to make it so that I have to find, you know, another male. I'll just be like, any slug that I find will be able to do it. Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
Now let's move on to talking about snails.
So those are slugs with shells.
Slugs with shells, although there's a little more diversity and craziness in the snail world than even in the slug world.
Whoa.
So first, I want to point out, if you have ever been to the ocean and you've been looking for shells, you have probably seen shells that have a tiny little hole in them. And if you've seen these shells that have a tiny little hole in them, what you're seeing is evidence of a moon snail. Moon snails, this is what they look like when they're underwater. And they are carnivorous snails that actually eat other snails or other limpets or mollusks or clams. And they do it by taking their radula, and this takes a long time, but that little mouth with all the teeth, they're actually able, they secrete a little bit of an acid to dissolve the shell, and then they start scraping and scraping, and they make a perfectly round little hole, and then they reach through and they eat the animal.
Whoa.
Haven't you ever wondered that before? Have you ever seen, in fact, I've got one right here that I'll show in closer detail when we finish, but there's a tiny little hole, like a perfectly formed hole in this shell. And I always wondered, like, what in the world is that from? It's from, oh, and thank you to Science Mom Jamie. Science Mom Jamie says it's a blue glaucus. So this one back here, blue glaucus. I couldn't remember the name.
Gotcha.
I always wondered, where do these holes come from? They come from a snail, a carnivorous snail that is actually quite a fearsome predator and can eat a lot of clams.
I assumed they drilled a hole in it to make jewelry or something. But
they also call these necklace snails because you can then easily string a little string through here and make a shell into a necklace if a moon snail has eaten the unfortunate occupant of said shell. Here is another type of gastropod, one that you have probably heard of because it's quite famous, the nautilus. So this is an aquatic snail, essentially, that lives in the ocean, and it has a beautiful spiral shell with all these chambers that can be filled with gas, and then by adjusting how much gas is in which chamber, it can swim. Nautilus are fascinating gastropods, and they do have kind of a rudimentary eye. They're ancient. We have fossils that look exactly like this from millions of years ago, and they're still swimming in our oceans today.
So it's actually a type of snail.
It's a gastropod. I don't know that you actually would want to call it a snail, but all snails are gastropods, all slugs are
Gotcha.
gastropods, and a nautilus is also a gastropod. Pretty awesome, right?
Yeah.
And here is a conch snail. So you've probably seen those big shells, conches. Well, there's a snail that builds that shell. Now, snails that have shells, they need to live in environments that have enough calcium because that's what they're doing. They're taking calcium from foods they eat and they're using them to then make a protective covering. And that covering over them protects them. They can draw back in to hide from predators, and it's kind of their home that they carry around with them. The conch snail is a big marine snail, and it makes a beautiful and large shell that is often, sold as like in tourist shops when you go to somewhere tropical.
So I've seen conch shells; they're enormous. So, is the snail itself the thing inside the shell?
Yes, so
it's got to be like
snail
as
itself,
big as a fist or bigger.
Oh, it is big. I mean, if you took the snail out of the conch shell, I mean, it would be like this big. It would be enormous.
And it's actually attached to the shell. It's not like hermit crab that moves in and lives there, right?
Yes, it is. It depends on the type of snail. I mean, some snails like escargot, the snails that they eat in parts of Europe, those can be pulled out of their shell pretty easily. But most snails, the back part is pretty firmly attached to the shell. It's part of the snail body. Mm. And here is a garden snail. This is the most common type, one of the most common types of snails. It started out in the Mediterranean and Europe, but because it tends to, hide in plants, and humans they like to move plants from one place to another for, gardens and things like that. It now lives most places that humans live, including Nevada. We live just outside of Las Vegas, and it is so dry here, we really don't have a lot of native snails. And the ones we do only live around the Colorado River and in wet areas. But the garden snail, you can find these in people's yards because they came in with plants. And then if they have a nice wet area, they can survive there pretty well.
So somebody in the chat was asking, how long does it take a conch snail to make its shell?
Oh, that's a great question. A long time. In terms of how many years, and we'll talk about this a little bit more once we finish the slideshow, I would just have to give a guess. But I would, some marine snails can live 10 to 20 years. They're pretty long lived. And I would guess that a conch shell, I guess it takes at least 3 or 4 years to get to that big size.
They are the tortoises of the sea.
The tortoises of the sea. And we're going to end with a quick note about invasive snail species, because the New Zealand mud snail is one of the most difficult invasive species that we have. This aquatic snail is a freshwater snail. So it doesn't live in the ocean. It lives in streams in New Zealand, and it's native to New Zealand and real common. You'll find it in all the streams there, but it has escaped and now lives in other places too. One way that they think it first came to the United States was actually from a fly fisherman, a very wealthy fly fisherman who just for fun was fishing in New Zealand, took off his wader boots and got on a private plane, flew to Montana and went fishing again the next day. And the boots were folded in such a way that one of these tiny little snails made its way from New Zealand to Montana. And then boom, you have a big problem, because these snails, just like slugs can be hermaphrodites where you only need 2 snails and then you can get more snails or more slugs. Well, these take it a step further. These are self-cloning snails, where just one snail can produce a colony of more than 40 million snails within a year, because they can reproduce 3 times a year each time that they reproduce, and they birth live snails. So the snail will birth these tiny little live snails, but they can produce up to 100 individuals at a time, and you only need one to get an enormous colony of millions of individuals.
Well, and we've already seen that when a species gets introduced somewhere where there are no predators, then they can grow out of control. And yeah,
they certainly can. They certainly can. Whoops. And I'm going to stop sharing the screen. Sorry about that awkward transition where I minimized. That probably looked kind of weird and streaky. All right. I know there are some great questions in the chat, and our moderators will be kind of collecting those and texting them to us because we couldn't see the chat while we were doing the slideshow. So we'll take questions in just a minute. Type your questions if you have questions about slugs or snails into the chat. But I want to show you a couple shells that we have, because we have been gathering shells from yard sales and other things for quite a few years now. We don't live close to the ocean, but I love shells. And so anytime I happen to see shells at a yard sale, I pick them up. And you can see that the variety of colors. Here is a sea snail that has a beautiful shell. The variety of colors and shapes are really incredible. And the cool thing about gastropods is that they have been around for so long. You can find snails that live like this in the ocean today. You can also find fossils that look just like this from millions and millions of years ago.
I think that might be a unicorn horn.
It's not a unicorn horn, it's a snail shell. Some of them are round and have a really tight spiral at the top and then a long body part here, and the snail would just come out of here. And others are, this beautiful spiral shape like we saw. And others, can have these really cool sort of horns and protrusions off to the side. So this is a snail shell as well. But let's talk a little bit about the conch shell. So here is a conch that we picked up at a yard sale for 50 cents. I was so excited. And you can see how big it is. This is a huge shell, and it has kind of a glossy inside here that is nice and smooth. And then on the outside, the end part here has been cut off, because if you cut off the end, do you know what you can do?
I do.
You can make a sound. So first, Math Dad, I want you to blow without making any sound with your lips, like just blow into it. Now do the same blowing, but blow off to the side. Did you hear how much louder that blow was? So if he blows, blow one more time. You can hear him blowing, but it doesn't sound that loud. Now blow through the conch. It's a lot louder. So the cool thing with conch shells is that if you can do, and what do they call this? When you play the trumpet, you do this.
Buzz your lips.
If you can do that and you do it into a conch shell, it sounds awesome. Yeah, that was louder than I was expecting. It's been a while since we've done that. So, and with a little practice, because I know Math Dad a couple of years ago, he was practicing and he got one that really sounded kind of like a trumpet blast, like just. And in the South Pacific Islands, they would often use these to, signal each other, because the sound will travel a long distance and it can be quite loud. Now let's talk a little bit.
Plays the trumpet. I like it.
Awesome. If you play the trumpet, then you definitely have an advantage doing this, because if you don't play the trumpet and you don't know how to buzz your lips and make that sound, then mine was not very impressive. Then it's a lot harder. Now I wanted to answer a couple questions about slugs and snails before we talk about slime, because we are going to spend just another minute talking about slug slime, because it's pretty amazing stuff.
So you said it kept the moisture in?
Yes, it keeps the moisture in, but if that's the only purpose that it solves, then why would snails have slime too? Well, it also really helps them move. It helps them move because they need to be gliding on a smooth surface, because the way they move, they don't have legs, right? They don't have legs like an insect does to help them move around. And a worm is going to be moving its body back and forth, kind of undulating through. They can't do that. So they actually move by expanding and contracting their foot. So they expand, contract. And if there's a smooth surface, that works really well and they can glide right along. But if the surface is rough, it doesn't work quite as well. And so the slime helps that surface to be smooth. And if you look after a slug or a snail, if you look at them as they're moving, you will see a trail of slime that is left behind. And that trail of slime is actually one way that they communicate with each other. So when slugs and snails leave that slime, they're actually leaving special little chemicals. And remember, they have a set of tentacles that are just chemical laboratories for sensing other chemicals in nature. And so they are really good at sending little signals to each other. And there are certain slugs and certain snails that are actually carnivorous. And they will, as soon as they find a slug trail or a snail trail, they'll be like, aha, lunch detected. And then they will follow the trail, trying to go faster than the slug or snail that left it until they catch up to him and try and eat him. So there are some snails that are carnivorous and are actually pretty fearsome hunters.
This reminded me of the dogs marking their territory. Leave a slime trail in case anybody else needs to know I'm here.
Yeah. A great question from Princess Perfect. Is this slime that you could play with? And that is a great question. It is not slime like the type that you make out of Elmer's glue where you can stretch it and then bring it back, but it is both elastic and viscous at the same time, which is really pretty cool. And I saw when I was researching for this episode, I saw this this beauty trend to put a bunch of snails on your face and let them crawl all over your face, and then the slime was supposed to make your skin softer. Perhaps that would work, although it would be really hard to get even coverage. Like, how are you going to get them to all crawl, uniformly everywhere and not miss a spot? And also, that's just kind of weird.
Beauty trends, people are willing to try weird things.
And Sylvia asks a great question. Ooh, I just missed it. Oh, Brent here. So, yeah, from Sylvia. Are slugs poisonous? It depends. It all depends on the slug. You saw that a lot of nudibranchs are very poisonous because on purpose, they eat anemones with stinging cells. They eat jellyfish that have stinging cells, and then they put those stinging cells into their body, or they eat poisonous sponges and they take those toxins and put them into their body. So yes, when it comes to sea slugs, a lot of them are very poisonous. When it comes to slugs on land, there are actually some that are quite edible, and cultures around the world would eat them. But you have to be kind of careful because it depends on what the slugs are eating. Remember, I told you that slugs are not picky eaters. They will eat just about anything. And because they will eat just about anything, sometimes they can eat things that are poisonous, and that poison will get put in their bodies. So you really need to be careful. And in fact, in France, where they eat snails, escargot, part of the preparation of eating snails, once you get your snails, you are going to put them on a diet of cornmeal or other foods where you know what they're eating. You have to do that for several weeks to make sure that you get things out of their system. Because if you don't know what the slug's been eating or the snail's been eating, and if the snail has been eating dog poop, and for real, snails will eat poop, and if the dog poop has some, pathogens or toxins in it, then that's going to go into the snail. So snails that you eat or slugs that you would eat, you would want to make sure that you sort of clean them out first. And I would not recommend it. Like, this would be survival food, in my opinion. Like, if that's the only thing you have to eat it to stay alive. That's kind of how I feel about it.
Have you ever eaten snails?
Okay.
You've been to France, right?
I have. So I was a foreign exchange student in France, and my host family got escargot just because I was an American, and they were like, oh, it's like the traditional French thing, you should eat them. Obviously, they did not like them because they served the snails, and everyone just took one, and then they didn't take any others. But then they kept saying, like, Jenny, would you like some more? And so I did my duty, and I ate like 15 escargot. And the whole time I was doing it, I was like, oh my goodness. Well, for first, I like snails. I think they're really cute. And so I felt bad eating them. And then second, they are so tough. It's like I would chew and I would chew and I would chew, and nothing would happen. It was like chewing on a bouncy ball. And then finally I'd be like, well, and I guess I got to swallow it. And I would swallow it. And I felt kind of sick to my stomach afterwards. So that is the one and only time that I have eaten snails.
All right. So in the chat, by all means, let us know if you have tried snails and if you like them.
So the sauce that they were cooked in was a garlic butter sauce. And I have to say, just about anything tastes good in a garlic butter sauce. So the taste was fine. But the fact that like you really couldn't chew them, and that I really like snails, so I didn't want to eat snails, I felt kind of bad.
It's Starlight Nights, like escar, gross.
Layla asks, are snails born with shells? That is a great question, and it all depends on the type of snail. Some snails, like slugs, actually lay eggs, and then they'll kind of hatch out of the eggs, and they don't really have a shell at first. Other snails, like the New Zealand mud snail, they actually give birth to fully formed miniature versions of themselves, tiny little live snails that have a shell already and are just ready to go. It all depends on the species.
So Science Mom Jamie says, nope, I will never eat a snail. But Science Mom Amber's like, it doesn't sound like they prepared them well. They're delicious.
Different strokes for different folks, right?
That's right. A few other people saying they like them. Stacy's parents tricked her brothers into eating them one time.
Now, a couple other questions that I wanted to answer about slugs, because I know that most people, so I have to say, just because I am such an animal lover, that if I find slugs or snails in my garden, I get kind of excited. Also, living in Nevada, it's pretty rare. I don't tend to find slugs or snails very often at all, because our environment is so dry that if I forget to water my garden for a day, it's like only the plants with the deepest roots are going to survive, and everything up on the surface is completely dried out. And slugs and snails, they will burrow down into the dirt a little bit, but they can't bury very deep. And so if your top 5 inches of soil dries out, then the slugs and the snails are in trouble. The slugs are going to die. The snails, they conceal themselves inside their shell with a little layer of mucus, And then they'll be able to survive a dry spell for a little while, as long as it doesn't get too dry or too hot. But most people, when they find slugs in their garden, they are not happy. Because if they live in a wet environment, a couple slugs means that pretty soon there could be hundreds of slugs, which means that pretty soon their entire garden could be eaten up by these animals. So how do you get rid of slugs? Because I know this is a question that a lot of parents who are watching probably have.
Well,
what do you think, Math Dad?
I mean, if nothing but salt everywhere, I mean, that would do the trick.
Terrible,
but, yeah,
terrible. Okay, number one, that's cruel and mean. Number two, salt is bad for plants. If you make your soil super salty, all of your plants in your garden are going to be like, whoa.
Okay, you just asked how to get rid of them. That would do it.
So there are a lot of animals that like to eat slugs, including chickens. So if you have chickens, one of my favorite ways for slug control is to take grapefruits or oranges, and after you eat out the inside, take the peel, the little semicircle peel, and stick them in your garden face down. And that citrus rind, slugs actually like a lot. They'll be attracted to it. Now, slugs are nocturnal, so if you go out in the day, you're not going to see as many slugs because they come out at night, and at night is when they're most active. But if you have either a flat board or those little upside-down grapefruit halves, that are hollowed out, the slugs will go in there, they'll start eating, and then when it gets warm during the day, they're going to hide. They're going to stay in that nice, dark, wet environment. So then you can just pick up the grapefruit halves that are now have a whole bunch of slugs in there, and you can set them in for your chickens. And the chickens will be like, woohoo, slugs, and they'll eat them up. That's one of my favorite ways for slug control.
That's not cruel. No.
Oh, so I mean,
circle of life.
But if you have a garden and you need to eat, like you need your garden for survival, but the slugs would like grow to a population of several thousand and eat your whole garden, I mean, you got to do something.
That's true. Animals
Right?
get a lot less cute when the garden plants start disappearing.
There are also nematodes, tiny little worms that you can buy that you can release in your garden that will actually attack, and they're microscopic, but they're like a little parasite that will reduce your slug population. So those are two options. And then I see that Jennifer suggested coffee. Coffee grounds are a great way to reduce slug as well, because if you put coffee grounds in your garden, it turns out that insects do not like coffee. The caffeine is just way too much for them. And slugs are the same way. If they're crawling around, and this is kind of funny to me because slugs, we said, will eat just about anything, like poop, dead animals, rotten fruit, fungi. That's all. They'll eat it, but they get to coffee grounds and they're like, nope, not doing the coffee. Can't do coffee. And so the coffee grounds are a pretty effective deterrent as well.
So will other citrus work besides oranges?
Yes. Shannon asked, will they eat lemons and other citrus too? Pretty much any type of citrus fruit that has that rind is nice and moist inside. And then if you put it face down, it will stay moist. Yeah, they'll come right in. They'll enjoy munching on the rind, and then that's a good way to gather them up. And then eggshells are also a good diatomaceous earth, or eggshells. If they're ground up and they're on the ground, they're actually microscopically, they're sharp enough that the slugs have a little bit of a hard time gliding over the diatomaceous earth or the coffee grounds.
So these are used coffee grounds?
Yeah, used coffee grounds. Like you brew the coffee, and then after the coffee is brewed, you take the grounds and throw them out on the grass.
Are slugs born in eggs? That's a good question.
Yes, most slugs. Yeah, slugs are. So snails can give birth they do eggs or live young, and slugs, almost all of the slugs lay eggs, and then the eggs hatch. So good question. Ashley asked, do slugs like mangoes? Probably. I think any type of fruit, they will eat pretty much.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Mangoes are good, but I don't like the aftertaste as much.
Oh, I love mangoes.
Yeah, and Science Mom will.
All right, it is getting to
all day.
time enough. We should do fact or fiction.
Okay. Oh, you did the facts and fiction. Sorry.
I did.
I thought I was going to quiz you. All right.
Nope, that's tomorrow.
All right.
So fact or fiction, the giant African snail can weigh up to 2 pounds.
Does it include the shell then? Okay. I mean, that conch is definitely in the 2 pounds, so it's got to be true. It's totally plausible. Man, this is a land snail though, or not? I don't know.
Yeah.
But okay,
the giant African snail is a land snail.
All right. Chat agrees. This is true.
It is true. So Anita and Jesse, I'm seeing several people who wrote down true in the chat. Land snails in general are going to be smaller than aquatic snails. Although there's a ton of variety. I mean, and if you just look at shells that you can find on a beach, some of them are teeny. Like this is the maximum size for this type of ocean snail. But then, this sea snail, by comparison, is enormous. So there's a lot of variety in size, but the giant African snail is the largest land snail, and it's huge. The record in the Guinness Book of World Records was almost exactly 2 pounds. That's 900 grams. That's enormous. And it was, a good 1.5 foot long.
That's pretty crazy because, yeah, I'd be scared if I came across something of that size kind of sliming its way along.
You can actually buy them as pets. And so if you want to have a snail pet, a giant African snail is a great candidate. But as with all pets, if you decide that you no longer want to take care of your pet, don't just release it into the wild, because in some areas, these are considered invasive species. And if they get out, they can reproduce. And because they have no natural predators in that area, they can overpopulate. All right. Depending on the species, snails can live between 1 and 2 years, 1 and 3 years.
Didn't you just say that the snails live 20 years for that conch? I think you gave this one away already.
I did. I'm glad you're paying attention.
I'm going to say false.
It is false. Snails can live upwards of 20 years. It all depends on the species, but some snails are very long-lived. All snails are herbivores.
I think you've given this one away as well, though, right? You said that some snails would chase after the others, and I've seen an epic chase scene of a underwater big snail chasing another snail with the dramatic music and everything. Yep. So they're not herbivores. Well, I imagine mostly they are, but not all of them are herbivores. And the one we saw was probably this conch snail. Probably the apex predator snail.
Yeah, the conch snail is a predator. It will eat dead fish, but it will also chase and eat, hermit crabs and other things if it can. So yes.
Wouldn't that be embarrassing? Got chased down by a snail.
So it is false. And Stacy and Mama Kay, I'm seeing so many people here. You were exactly right with it being false. All right. Last one. Snails can have lungs or gills depending on their habitat.
Snails can have lungs or gills. So the land ones, they had that breathing. I'm thinking slugs. Shoot, I assume they're the same. Land ones probably are in lungs, and the sea ones are probably have gills. How else would they breathe? Sounds very plausible to me. Chat seems to think it's true mostly. It's a little torn. I'm going to say true.
It is true. It is true. So most snails are land snails. They have a lung. They have a simple lung. And similar to our little slug friends, they have, a little hole that brings air in. But there's a lot of variety. And here's the cool thing about gastropods. You didn't just have one time where a snail evolved to not have a shell and then all slugs came from that. You have multiple times where these things happened. And there's a ton of variety. So yes, you have snails that breathe through lungs and have lungs. I saw someone ask, are snails mammals? They are not, because they do not have a skeleton. We have a skeleton, and dogs and cats, all mammals have a skeleton inside that gives them their structure. But most snails, a lot of snails do have a heart, a very simple nervous system that kind of has a bigger area that you can think of as a brain, but it's not a true brain, and a liver. A lot of snails have a liver. They have a digestive system. And then some snails have lungs, a single lung. Some snails have a gill that they breathe through, but there's a lot of variety, and there's some weird in-between stuff, special breathing gas exchange systems that aren't really lungs or gills. They're kind of in between.
Yeah, really cool. You got some questions here.
All right. Oh, these are great questions. How long have snails been around? Millions of years. We have fossilized shells that date back, before the dinosaurs. So they're older than the dinosaurs. Another great question, does the shell grow with the snail? It does. So the snail shell will start out, when the snail is first born, it's just like this tiny little spiral here up top. And then as it grows, the shell continues to get bigger all the way around. And depending on the species of snail, there might be kind of a maximum size that it can reach, but it starts out super small. And then as it grows, the body just continues to make a new layer of calcium carbonate right here to build onto the shell and make it bigger.
So that's what that's why it's spiraling out.
That's why it
because
spirals.
The snail inside was actually growing larger, so the shell had to be bigger to accommodate it.
And some snails spiral clockwise and some spiral counterclockwise. And in some species of snails, you can actually get both with the same species, some that are clockwise, some that are counter. The New Zealand mud snail is like that. Most of them go clockwise, but every now and then you'll get one that goes the opposite direction. Where
like right-handed, left-handed, maybe?
Yeah. How do sea slugs survive in salt water? I love this question. So we did say that salt, drying out is bad for snails, for slugs. And especially slugs that are on land, they can't take very much before they dry out. And so that's why they produce that protective layer of slime. Oh, I gotta tell you something awesome about slime. When slugs produce slime, they actually are not putting out like water, because if they were putting out water with their slime, they'd be losing a lot of water. And that's like their number one goal in life is I don't want to dry out. And so when they produce slime, they actually produce dry little granules underneath them. And those dry granules, when they come in contact with a wet environment, and remember, they always like to live in wet environments, then they absorb water from the environment. And the rate of absorption is crazy. We're talking 100 times. That would be like putting a single grain of rice on a spoon and having that rice expand to be an entire tablespoonful of content.
Okay, so this makes sense. I mean, it's amazing that it can happen, but when it was making all this slime, it's like, well, doesn't that take a lot of water to do? But you're saying
it's taking the water from the environment. It's a very smart strategy.
Well, that's fascinating.
Yeah. All right. Another question about slugs. So how long have snails been to snails grow from the shell? What's the biggest snail? The biggest snail on land is the African giant snail. The biggest land in the ocean is a species of conch snail that is really huge. And then if you were to count, nautilus is not really a snail, but if you were to count the nautilus as a snail, it's also quite large. But it's a gastropod. Why do snails have shells? Primarily for protection, so that they have a safe place that they can withdraw in that is harder for predators to break through. Because birds will eat snails and a lot of other animals will eat snails. And so the slug has to protect itself chemically. A lot of slugs will produce chemicals that either taste bad or are poisonous to try and protect themselves from getting eaten. But the slugs that you find in your garden are pretty edible to most birds. And so they protect themselves by being nocturnal and only going out at night. It depends on the slug.
This question is going to stump you though, because salt is bad.
That's the question I was answering. Sorry, I got sidetracked because I was like, got to tell you about slime.
Yeah.
Now, seawater is an environment where you do have more salt. But if you are adapted to live in that environment, then your blood and the part of you that has all of the water is actually going to be different. It's going to have a different concentration than most mammals and other animals that live on land. And so the sea slug, if you were to look inside the sea slug at its concentration of salt in its body, it's going to be real similar to the salt water. But if you look at the concentration of salt in a land slug, it's going to be way lower. But a sea slug could still dry out. If you take a sea slug out of the ocean and have it dry out, it could still be in a situation where there's too much salt and it's drying out too quickly. But in the ocean, it's just fine because it's adapted to that environment and it also has quite a bit of salt inside its body.
All right.
Did that answer it?
You got lucky on that one. All right.
Okay.
That's a good question though, because
Next question, do zebra mussels fall into this category? Zebra mussels, and clams are also a type of gastropod, but they are they're different than snails. And in today's lesson, I focused exclusively on slugs and snails. I was going to do all mollusks and worms, but then when I started researching, I was like, oh no, there's too much cool stuff and we'll run out of time. So we're just going to focus on slugs and snails. But yeah, clams are a type of mollusk, and the mollusk family includes way more cool species like the nautilus. And then last question, is the shell like an outside skeleton? It kind of is. It's a structure that is for protection and support, but there is one difference between an exoskeleton, like what a beetle has, and a snail shell. The exoskeleton, provides the structure for the animal, but the snail, the structure is really in that muscle-like foot that it can contract and expand that helps it move. And the shell is mostly for protection. All right. I totally went way past the time I was supposed to go to because I was so excited.
It's time for some math.
So yeah, time for math.
I'm singing a song, I don't know the words. I don't know the words to this song. I'm singing it loud and I'm singing it long, but I don't know the words to this song. No, I don't know the words to this song. All right, let's try this. 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8. I'm writing down a sequence of numbers here, and this is a very special sequence of numbers. Has a name, and there's a rule for how we go from, or to figure out what the next number is. But in the chat, let me know if you know what sequence of numbers I have started writing out here, because this one's a very famous and just a fun sequence to encounter. So, oh, I'm seeing it right there, Fibonacci. So I'm sure I can't spell Fibonacci. Fibonacci sequence. And it's named after a mathematician named Fibonacci. And the rule for creating the numbers, I even see somebody in the chat telling me what the next number is. It is indeed a 13. So our rule for getting our next number is you add the two numbers that came ahead of it. So 1 plus 1 equaled 2. So I write down the 2. To get the next number, 1 plus 2 is 3. 2 plus 3, 5. 3 plus 5 is 8. 5 plus 8 is 13. So to get the next number, 8 plus 13 is 21. And we can keep going. This sequence will go forever. One of the things you will notice is that the numbers here are getting bigger each time. So 13 plus 21 is 34. And probably have to wrap around because I'm running out of space. 21 plus 34 would be 55. And yeah, before long, these numbers are blowing up to be quite big. And there are some interesting things that this models. Like you could say, oh, if you have, 1 rabbit and 2 rabbits, you'll end up with 3. 2 rabbits plus 3 rabbits would be 5 rabbits. And you could kind of think about generations growing. And there are some really interesting things that you can model here. And if you get into this idea of limits, what you'll see, the ratio of successive terms is kind of approaching what we call the golden ratio. But I just wanted to focus on how does this sequence get generated? And the rule was, so if I called this F1, F2, F3, so I'm numbering the values of my sequence here, then in general, the rule would be f of n is always found by doing f of n minus 1 plus f of n minus 2. So that looks kind of fancy, and I'm not going to make a big deal about it, but that's how a mathematician would write out this rule that we talked about, where you always add the two previous numbers to get the next number. And I wanted to see, can we go backwards? Could we figure out what number came before this 1? What do you think, Science Mom?
1/2 plus 1/2 is equal to 1.
Oh, but so that would, if we went back 2 numbers, you're saying 1/2 plus 1/2 equals 1?
Yeah, but
okay.
but
then would 1/2 plus 1
no.
equal 1? Oh.
So you'd have to have 0, but then what adds to get
You would
0?
have to have a 0 here. That is correct, because I need 0 plus 1 to equal 1. I need 2 numbers here that add to 1. Okay, Science Mom, what would come before that?
0, 0, and then it's just
no,
0.
Is 0 plus 0 equal to 1?
But how do you get the 0?
You have to put a 1 here.
What?
1 plus 0 is 1.
Okay, then what's before that?
Well, what plus 1 would give us 0?
-1.
-1.
Oh.
Aha. Okay. So what goes next?
What plus -1?
What plus -1 would give us 1?
2.
2. Aha. And
Whoa.
so, yeah, we're working our way backwards here. What plus 2 would give -1?
-3.
-3.
What?
Uh-huh.
I've never seen it go backwards before. This is weird.
Okay, and what plus -3 would give us 2?
5.
5. All right.
Ooh,
Are you noticing anything about these numbers as we go backwards?
I'm seeing some similarities.
It looks a lot like these numbers: 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, except 1, -1, 2, -3, 5.
Whoa.
As we head in the other direction, we're seeing these same Fibonacci numbers showing up, some of them with minus signs, but yeah, really cool pattern. All right,
do we see the Fibonacci sequence in real life? Like,
yeah. So kind of mentioned it real fast. We didn't have a lot of time because somebody just kept talking about snails and stuff. But, so yeah, the two places that come to mind immediately, like if we were breeding rabbits, we might see that type of growth from one generation to the next, or typically they breed a lot faster than that actually, if we were just doing one offspring per. But so the golden ratio. So we haven't actually talked about the golden ratio, but that when you take the successive terms, it turns out that they're about 1.61 times bigger than the term that came ahead of them. And we could actually name what that number is. It's 1 plus the square root of 5 all over 2. And it's a special number called the golden ratio that has some neat properties. I don't think we've got time to go into them today, but I wanted to just see, let's make up one new Fibonacci sequence by just changing the first two terms.
And I'm all ready for painting with a scientist, so if we want to go a few minutes over, we can.
Okay, well, we're going over no matter what at this point. But all right, so let's make up some new numbers. Science Mom, give me a number.
7.
7, and I'm going to try -2. So
You're saying we're going to make a Fibonacci sequence
we're going to make
from this?
Fibonacci sequence. We're going to start with these as our initial numbers.
Ooh.
Maybe I need to write bigger. 7 and -2. All right. So tell me what comes next, Science Mom. I'm going to make you.
So 7 minus 2 is 5.
Okay. Yep. So if we add those two numbers, we do indeed get 5. Okay. Then what?
All right. What comes next? -2 plus 5 is like 5 minus 2. That's 3.
Good. 5 plus 3
is 8.
3 plus 8
is 11.
8 plus 11?
Oh, we're going to be getting big fast. Is 19. 19 plus 11 is 31. 30. Yep, because 9 plus 1 is 10.
Yep.
Whoa.
All right, and of course, this would go forever and ever. So it's entirely possible to build our own Fibonacci sequences. And yeah, it'll work out and it'll have a lot of the exact same properties. All that changed were those initial numbers that we started with. And you could even ask, could we go backwards in this case? Well, yes, we could. We won't take the time to do it now, but yeah, this Fibonacci sequence, if this is the first time you're seeing it, it's not going to be the last time you're seeing it. And I see some of you guys are in the chat. You're just listing out all these numbers.
Darlin Wilson did our sequence and then plus infinity more. I like that.
That's right. Yeah, these go forever. So kudos to those of you who are ahead of us on these calculations. Yeah, it's a lot of fun to build your own sequence. And not only that, you could make your own new rules. For example, we could say, well, let's always do the first number minus the next number, see what we get. Or we could let's do the first number plus twice the next number, or any combination of those. And yeah, you can have a lot of fun building sequences, and then challenge your friend to see if they can figure out, how did you come up with that? How do I predict the next number? And it's a very good mental exercise. So.
All right, check out this little pun, Math Dad. Whoops, that was not the pun.
Hi.
This one.
All right.
Science Mom Jamie.
Fibonacci, the last time you will see it. Come on, Math Dad, you missed that pun.
Fibonacci, the last time you will see it.
Fibonacci. I don't know if I'm getting.
Help us out. We're not getting the pun, but I think there's a good one there.
Oh yeah, just like now we got our math mystery.
Oh, that's right.
Okay.
First, I'm going to ask you what's in the bag. You ready for this?
I'm ready.
All right. What is in the bag? I live in the sea. Some call me a living fossil.
It's a snail. It's a.
I take my home everywhere I go.
It's the chambered nautilus.
It is, and I can swim. I can swim as the last hint because the nautilus can swim really well up and down.
That's crazy to think of. I've never seen one swimming, but yeah, the living fossil thing gave it away because, well, and today's topic, we kind of knew where we were headed.
Here we go. So
Fibonacci.
Fibonacci it. The last time you see it. That's a great pun.
All right. Here's our
the
game.
math mystery.
The math mystery is actually just a game. So we've got this sum to 15 game. So I'm just going to write the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9 here. All right. And Science Mom and I are going to take turns claiming numbers. And the first person who gets 3 numbers that sum to exactly 15 is the winner.
I really like this game. I usually lose. Math Dad usually wins, but we played this one time before.
Right.
I forgot what the winning strategy is, though. So
yeah.
Everyone would say, good luck, Science Mom.
All right. So I'll pick a number. So I picked 2.
And I'm going to pick 5.
Okay. They can't see the color. Do a different shape. Do a square or something.
Okay.
Maybe they can see the color. All right. Cool. So we're just trying things for fun. I'll pick 7.
Oh boy. All right, I'm going to pick 6.
Okay, so that was definitely the right choice to block me because 2 plus 7 was 9, and I just needed the 6 to win. Now Science Mom has 11, so she needs the 4. I'm going to block her.
Oh man.
I'm going to take the 4.
But I'm supposed to get to 15 in 3.
Yeah, you only get to use 3 numbers, and you have to get to
so
exactly
that means
15.
that now I can't do it. So now I just need to try and block Math Dad and see if I can get a...
Or you need a different pairs of numbers.
Pairs.
It's entirely possible. Maybe,
All right.
Maybe it's still possible. Yeah, it likely is.
Okay, I'm going to take the 8.
Okay. So you've got some big combos. So like 8 plus 5 is 13. 8 plus 6 is 14. I don't want her to get the 1. And I don't know that I have a win right away either. So I'm just going to take the 1 myself.
All right, I'm going to take the 3.
Okay, so just a sec. Is the game still going? So I keep mixing our colors here. So I have 11, not enough. Well, obviously I would take 9 at this point, but the danger is that one of us already won and we didn't catch it. So that's a little embarrassing sometimes when that happens.
But we've got a stalemate here.
Well, what about 9 plus 4 plus 2?
Uh-oh.
I think I just won. So, yeah, I was pretty sure nobody else had won up to this point, but we were playing kind of fast. So, yeah, I won this game. So the challenge is, what's the winning strategy? Or is there a winning strategy? Does one player have the advantage over the other player? And I will just tell you that if you really want a hint, you can go dig into some past videos that we've done, because there is a construction we've talked about already in a previous quarantine episode that will help us out, but I will save the answer for next time.
Awesome. I did see a couple people asking about Painting with the Scientist. The same place that you got your handout for today also has an outline for Painting with the Scientist. I'll be doing
on Patreon.
Today's episode. Yeah, it's on Patreon. It's a free download. I'll be doing today's episode, and we're going to be talking about nudibranchs. Now, we have an engineering challenge for you guys.
Yes, indeed we do. And I'm going to move us down to the table here.
We'll do this real quick.
Okay.
So for our engineering challenge, we have these really cute little slugs or worms or caterpillars, whatever you want to call them. And you can actually make them move kind of like a worm or a slug or a caterpillar moves just by blowing with the straw. So I've got a straw here and I've got my little paper construction. And if I blow, it's pretty fun.
This is crawls right along.
All right, so Math Dad, I challenge you to a race.
All right. So do we want to show how to make it real quick?
All right, show them how to make it real fast, and then we're going to have a race.
Okay, so the way one makes this, you cut a piece of paper here. At first, we tried really stiff paper, but then we realized that this
construction paper
or softer paper seemed to work better. It didn't resist as much. All right, so I fold it in half, and then I'm going to fold both ends in towards the center. So that one in towards the center. This one in towards the center. And then I'm going to fold again towards the center from both ends. And I'm even going to fold it over and press down. At that point, I can maybe cut off the corners to give it a little more round shape, or You could even try to make it round. And then when you unfold it, you have a caterpillar shape. And you can just give it a face, and yeah, there you go. We've already got another one that's already made, ready for a race between me and Science Mom. So
all right,
starting on this end of the table, and so it has to crawl the whole way. If we accidentally blow it and it creeps ahead, got to start over.
Okay. On your mark, get set, go.
Oh, dang. Oh no. I blew from too far behind.
Woo!
All right, Science Mom wins that one.
That was quite a bit of fun. All right. Our art prompt for tomorrow is to draw a favorite moment from quarantine. And I'm gonna, Matt's Dad?
Yeah.
Talk for a minute while
They
I
want to hear my
upload the
song
picture.
again? Is that what
No,
I'm singing
new
a
song.
I don't know the words. I don't know the words to this song. I'm singing it loud and I'm singing it long, but I don't know the words to this song. No, I don't know the words to this song.
Guys, it was all for naught because I thought that I could upload the awesome image that Science Mom Krista made, but I forgot that it's on the desktop of the other computer, not in the shared Dropbox folder. So we all heard the song again for nothing.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
All right.
So you got Painting with the Scientist coming up in a few minutes.
The art prompt, though, I don't have the awesome image to show you, but you can find it on Facebook or on Patreon. So the art prompt is to think back to one of your favorite episodes or your favorite moments from quarantine, and then draw an image. So whether it's, maybe you liked Fossil Friday or the interview with a volcanologist and the fiery volcano, or maybe the dry ice bubble. What are some of your favorite episodes, Matt Dad? If you had to pick a favorite episode.
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, I really did like talking about dinosaurs. But yeah, just some of the experiments we did, static electricity, and yeah, I've got some good memories. A few scarier ones with Science Mom almost spilling on the laptop that are coming back to mind for some reason. But yeah.
So, yep. We've had so much fun. So we're looking forward to just kind of doing a review through art. And then I did want to share real quick some of the art that we had last time, because last time we ran out of time to show our pendulum art. So we will end with a very short slideshow of only 4.
All right,
so,
Rishabh,
beautiful. He tied to the chandelier, just a little cup with paint, and got some great patterns. And Graham did it outside on the grass with a Gatorade bottle with some paint in it.
Nice.
And then here's a miniature one with Legos, which I thought was fantastic. And then here's a great setup as well. If you did not have time to do
very nice, Graham.
Yeah, if you didn't have time to try this, it's one of my favorite art prompts that we've done. It was really a lot of fun. So I would say,
I spent quite a while programming in Desmos. That was kind of fun.
Oh yeah, Matt's dad has been working on trying to program a pendulum swinging in Desmos. All right, we are going to be back in just over 5 minutes with Painting with the Scientist. So if you're staying for that, I will see you then. Thanks so much to everyone who joined us, and we will see you tomorrow with some cool scientific mysteries.
Bye.